What's up guys, Justin here with the CGEssentials.com, back with another Blender animation tutorial for you. So in today's video we're going to continue our series on the ninja scene, and in this video we're going to animate the plate breaking when it hits the wall. So that we're going to have the ninja kind of lifting it up with the telekinesis and then throwing it against the wall and the plate breaking. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so remember we've already got our scene set up where he lifts the plate, pulls it back, and then throws it against the wall. But when it hits the wall, nothing really happens, right? So what we need to do is we need to add the next step to this. And so the next step is going to be that we want to animate this so that the plate breaks. And so for the plate to break, the first thing we need is for the plate to be broken into pieces so that those pieces can shatter when it hits the wall. So for me, I'm going to use the Blender add-on RBD Lab to do this. You could probably do it with the cell fracture add-on, but I don't think the cell fracture add-on really manages the different parts very well. And so this is going to give you some tools that are going to make that a little bit easier. So you could do something similar to this with cell fracture, but we're going to use RBD Lab. And so the first thing we want to do is we need to shatter the plate. Right? Because right now the plate is just like a simple geometric object. I don't think I even gave it any thickness. So what we want to do is, using RBD Lab, we just want to click on the button for scatter. I do not want this to break into a bunch of different parts and pieces. So I just want a few parts and pieces in here, nothing huge. So I'm just going to set this so that we get 15 pieces. Like this. So in the scatter function under secondary, we're going to set this to 15. Notice how that's going to kind of show us where the particles are. And then we just want to set this so that it breaks based on its own particles. Well, then we can come in here and click on the button for fracture. So when we fracture this, notice what this did is this broke this up into a bunch of different parts and pieces that are now contained inside of a separate collection. And so there's some things we're going to have to do to fix this up, but in general, this is where we're going to start. So the first thing you're going to notice, is right now the plate looks kind of funky. The reason the plate looks kind of funky is because it has its set inner materials and outer materials on this object. So if you're doing like concrete or something, it wants the inside of these to be a different color than everything else. In this case, we don't. So we're just going to take this inner material that's in here, and we're just going to set our base color back to white, like this. So now you don't really get that difference in color anymore like you did before. So that's going to be the first piece. Second piece is, notice how if we click play, nothing's happening anymore. So when RBD Lab shattered this plate, it hid your original cylinder that was your plate. So notice how if I unhide that, I can still see that in here. So that object is still in here and it's still moving, right? You just can't see it anymore because it was hidden. So we want to use that object, which already has the movement applied to it, as a parent to the cylinder objects that were created over here when this was fractured. All right, and so what we want to do is we want to go pick out all of those cylinder cells that were created, the cell fractures. We want to do a shift click to select them all. Then we want to do a control click and we want to select this plate. So now we have these selected, with our plate being the last thing that's selected. Then we're going to come over into our window right here and we're going to do a control P. And we're going to select the option for set parent to object. So what that's going to do is that's going to parent the movement of these objects to this plate right here. So now I'm going to hide this cylinder and I'm going to click play. Notice how that's going to have the same movement associated with it that it did before. So this is basically moving and it's just following along with the physics properties of the plate that we had in here before. So, which is great, but now we need to give it its own physics. And so what we want to do is we want to scroll down and look into the rigid bodies section down here for this object. And so what we need to do is, right now, these objects don't have any physics associated with them. They're just parented to the movement of the other cylinder. Well, what I want to do is I want to click the button for Add Rigid Body Actives down below. So when I click on that, what that's going to do is that's going to add rigid body physics to everything in this collection right here. But now we have another problem. If I click play, notice how my plate's just going to break on the ground, right? So you get like some pieces in here that are moving along with this and some pieces that aren't, and then all the pieces just kind of like blow in there at the end. So not exactly what we want. What we want is we want these objects to have this kinematic box checked at keyframe 1. And we want to click on the button for a keyframe right here. I'm not sure if you have to click update or not, so I'm going to click on update. But what we want is to keyframe this so that the movement is controlled by the Blender animation system until that keyframe 79, which is kind of what we did before. So now if I run this, you can see how it's following along with the animation again, but the rigid body physics don't work after keyframe 79. So what we need to do is we need to set a keyframe at 79 where the kinematic is still set. We're going to click on update, but then at frame 80, remember that's when we turn our physics on, right here. So at frame 80, for all these objects, we want to uncheck the kinematic box. And we're going to click the little key button right here. We're going to click on update. And so what that means is that now up to keyframe 79, this is controlled by the animation system. At keyframe 80, we're setting a keyframe that this is now turned off, and these objects are controlled based on the rigid body system inside of Blender. So, but the problem is, as soon as that happens, our plate is shattering, right? And we don't want our plate to shatter until it hits the wall. So, I mean, it is kind of an interesting look for it to kind of shatter early, but in this case, we want it to shatter when it hits the wall. So, we're going to go back to keyframe 80, and keyframe 80, we're going to add a glue constraint right here. A glue constraint is a constraint that keeps this object together. So it sets how much the objects are going to stick together. So I'm going to add this glue constraint, and I'm going to keyframe the glue strength to be 420 at this point. So now it's going to stick together, right? And 420 I think is a pretty strong glue strength, so I think it's just going to hit the wall and then stick together. Right, so now your pieces are being controlled by the physics system. They're sticking together, but the problem is when it hits the wall, it's just bouncing off instead of breaking. And so what we want is at keyframe, we'll call it 88 right here. So right before this plate hits the wall, maybe 89. So at keyframe 89 right here, what we want to do is we want to set our glue strength to a value of 1. And actually at 88, we want this to have a glue strength of 420. So we're going to keyframe that, click on update. And then at the keyframe after that, so keyframe 89, we want to set our glue strength to 1. So we're basically taking that glue strength and in one keyframe, setting it to 0. Well, we could say 0 or we could say 1. It's going to be so light that it's going to break when it hits the wall. But now, when I play this, this is going to hit the wall, and it's going to break when it hits the wall. So we've set this to have a really strong glue strength at 88, a really weak glue strength at 89, and that's when it hits the wall. So now we've got this view where we're throwing this against the wall, and then it's shattering. And then one other thing we can do with RBD Lab, which is another reason why I'm using this, is if we scroll down, notice how there's options in here to emit debris and dust. So what I want is right now this only has 15 pieces in here, but I want some little pieces to come off of this. So starting at keyframe 90, which is where my plate breaks, right here, I want to add debris emitted from that current frame. So when I do that, what that's going to do is that's going to emit debris objects when it hits the wall. So now if I run this whole thing, he's going to take the plate, throw it against the wall, it's going to break, and it's going to generate this extra debris. And right now this extra debris is too big. So we're just going to come down and we're just going to set our debris to be a lot smaller. So something like this, maybe. All right, so now if we play this, it's going to lift the plate, it's going to throw it against the wall, the plate's going to break, and the debris is going to be the proper size. The only thing we have to do is go fix the color of the debris, because the debris looks like concrete debris right now. And so what we can do is we can just go find, there's going to be a collection in here called Debris Basics. These are basically the things that are getting generated and added to the particle collection that this is creating in here. But what we want to do is we want to go find that Debris Basics. And notice how there's this inner material 001 over here. We just want to adjust that color so that it's also white, right? Our debris should be white because our plate is white. So now we've got this scene where he picks the plate up, throws it against the wall, it breaks, and we get this extra debris in here as well. All right, so now we have all the pieces together except our camera, which is what we're going to talk about in the final video of this series. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below what you think about this add-on, about this tutorial. I just love having that conversation with you guys. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.